Now, the official story is that it was a weather balloon that some man reported to have seen a UFO, but when the U.S. government got down, it was a weather balloon. Nothing here. No, no, don't. Nothing here. Nothing to worry about, ladies and gentlemen. Go back to your TV shows and your sports. Nothing to be seen here. But when you actually have a look at the many people that were actually on site, were involved in the operation, in covering this thing up, and when I speak about this topic, a lot of people think I'm just recounting some tale. When you look at a subject matter enough, there becomes a theme present within it. When you cross-reference information, when you hear accounts over and over and over again, and when you've looked at the cornucopia of information that I have, it becomes very clear that, okay, this has to be given a lot more credibility, particularly when it's coming from the kind of sources that have actually been involved in this. I mean, this is not speculative. When I hear about someone having done something, they speak about it from their own accounts. This is the kind of thing that you can't really mistake. You either did it or you didn't. Now, granted, that person could be lying, but when you hear enough accounts from other people that have gone through the same thing, you give it credibility. So I just wanted to preface this by saying that I formed this knowledge from having read thousands and thousands of documents over the last few years in regards to, not last few years, what am I saying? A long time. I've been interested in this subject matter for a long time. I'll just say that. And it's become clear that this is the narrative when it comes to the Roswell incident. I always use this as the benchmark for essentially what's happened over the last more modern history of the UFO agenda. But basically, there were 4 extraterrestrial beings within these craft. Most of them were dead. I understand 3 of them were dead, reported to be dead. And they were stored cryogenically. One of them actually was alive and was actually kept in a facility. I believe it was S4. Don't quote me, but one of the facilities for a number of years. This was known as ED1, also known as Thor. And there's actually footage of an interview, interestingly enough, with this extraterrestrial. And this is, I'm not sure when this was filmed, but this footage is still accessible if you go have a look on the interwebs. But this being was said to have gotten sick at some point. It wasn't able to deal with the atmosphere. Later on, I think after a year, it experienced some issues with breathing. But it was also notorious for lying. This was described as one of the gray-like beings. You have a look at the video, and its movement is very consistent with many of the reports and so forth. But this is the Roswell incident. Now, bearing in mind that whereas most people are aware of this particular incident in terms of Roswell, and a lot of them disavow the notion that there were actual extraterrestrial craft, it was around this theme, around the First World War, that I would say, started seeing a lot more instances of reports. And the theme that we've seen here is that after this incident took place, so after we saw this Roswell incident and many other instances, the U.S. government took it upon itself to really look at this UFO incident. And there was a team that was assembled known as Majestic 12, also known as Majority 12. And this is the reason why most people don't have any understanding of what goes on with the UFO agenda, because of Majestic 12. They took it upon themselves. This team was tasked with the responsibility of ensuring that this stuff did not get out to the general public. So this deals with the PSYOP in terms of changing the narrative in regards to what's going on with the extraterrestrial involvement. This also deals with recovering craft. Now, there are other groups such as Operation Moondust that dealt with recovering extraterrestrial debris and so forth. But fundamentally, MJ12 was responsible for the censoring of this information. And interestingly enough, one of the things that we saw after the First World, actually it was the Second World War, that we started seeing the detonation of nuclear bombs, was certain groups, or at least one group of these aliens, became more prevalent in discovery. And the theme you see here is that after we started seeing these detonations, there were many reports of these extraterrestrial beings. And at some point during the reign of Eisenhower, interestingly enough, we saw Eisenhower, and this is coming from the testimony of Eisenhower and Eisenhower's granddaughter, who is still alive and actually attests to this. So this is very compelling. I realize a lot of people, particularly in the scientific community, don't give a lot of respect for eyewitness reports and the accounts of people, even though they are still alive. But I think it's the ultimate source, because other than seeing something yourself, that's all you can go by. And there is there is a lot of evidence that I put in the sway of when enough people say something. So, according to many of the people that actually worked with Eisenhower, and also his granddaughter, who was saying that President Eisenhower actually said this, Eisenhower actually had a meeting at a point, because bearing in mind the United States military, Air Force, call it what you will, the secret government at the time, they had, now granted, when I say secret government, things have changed a lot. At a point, the presidents were obviously briefed on what was going on with the UFO agenda. At present, it is clear that they are not. But definitely with Eisenhower, according to him, there was a meeting that took place where he was actually able to meet up with one of these extraterrestrial beings, or someone that was representing them. As fictitious as it sounds, there was a peace treaty that was made where these aliens, after seeing what was going on with these detonations and so forth, so to speak, the kids had found the matches, and they were concerned about the effect that this was having not only in their planet, on this planet, right, which they were actually visiting, right, but also, from what I understand, the solar system, as it were. And as you would imagine, detonating nuclear weapons, I think, is something that would definitely cause a lot of concern if I was in someone's neighborhood. But whether or not you buy it, the evidence shows that this meeting was had, and the concern that was raised by at least one of these groups was the concern of humans detonating these nuclear weapons, and this was something that they were trying to essentially get the current establishment to stop doing. Now, the other thing, this is another account that I've heard, bearing in mind that there are many contacts that were taking place. The other theme I have seen in regards to this particular meeting was that there was a treaty that was actually made. Now, I have a feeling this is actually dealing with another alien race, because whereas a lot of people kind of generalize and make it as if visitation is taking place by only one race here, we're dealing with many different entities, and there are many different accounts of encounters with not just little green or the grays, so to speak, but also accounts of other non-terrestrial beings. But whereas one of them, I would say, one of these groups was considered to be more beneficent. This was the group that was trying to essentially get the president or the administration to stop using these nuclear weapons. There was another group that was not so beneficent, and there was a treaty that was made, and this is known of in many of the records, where these aliens were essentially willing to come in and perform experiments on the populace. This explains the abduction phenomenon that we are so familiar with in the ufology scene. And the treaty essentially allowed the U.S. government, in exchange for technology, for these extraterrestrial beings to abduct human beings, cattle, and so forth, perform experimentations on them. The understanding I have is that initially the treaty dealt with just animal mutilation, or allow them to essentially experiment on animals, but these aliens essentially broke the treaty and started experimenting on humans and so forth. And there were certain, obviously, concessions that were given within the treaty, like, and this is within the Eisenhower administration, that this alien race would only be permitted to perform certain abductions and so forth, and do certain things, but they later went on to perform a lot more. They were supposed to, at the time, give a record of all the abduction accounts. But the fundamental thing we find here is that this treaty was violated significantly. And at the time, obviously, dealing with a far more technologically advanced society and so forth, there wasn't much that the United States government could do about it at the time, so they just went along with this thing. But this is the general theme that you find when you have a look at the records pertaining to the ufology scene, that there was actually a treaty that was formed within the Eisenhower administration, and it actually explains a lot of the events that took place in regards to the abductions by at least one of these factions of aliens.